All right, well, thanks for coming around to this week's seminar, everyone. So this is a regular public seminar that we do in photovoltaics. We appreciate you attending today. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Monique Alfris back to UNSW. Monique received her undergraduate degree in photovoltaics in 2005. She went on from that to Sydney Uni, where she got a master's in economics, and has been applying her education in environmental sustainability for a decade or more.
Oh, wow.
That's what it says here. Almost a decade. You can just bump it up to a decade. So after getting her degree, she worked in the Australian construction industry for several years, working on sustainability and built environment, and gained experience in technical design, policy advisory services, and education. Following this, she worked for the Green Building Councils in Mauritius and Ghana. As a sustainability and energy specialist for Good Return, which is another Australian non-profit organization, Monique worked on small-scale renewable energy projects and loan products with microfinance institutions across Asia, and then finally landed in India to co-found Pollinate Energy, which is what she'll be speaking about today. Pollinate provides solar lights and mobile phone chargers to urban slum dwellers through a microfranchise and microfinance model. So I'm quite interested to hear more about Pollinate and its model, and we welcome you to UNSW, and please, Monique, the floor is yours.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for having me back. Hello. I'm going to start with a short video which is attached to a crowdfunding campaign that we just completed. So we were trying to raise $10,000 for our next 5 micro franchise businesses to start, and we were successful in that. It just finished and we got $10,580. That's pretty exciting. So the video sort of doesn't make sense for you guys at the end, but it's a nice introduction to what we do. So.
Pollinate Energy is a not-for-profit social business focused on tackling energy poverty. By providing access to low-cost, clean energy technology, we help improve the lives of poor people living in India's urban slums. After a trip to Bangalore in 2012 to help electrify a community of quarry workers living in tents, 3 of our co-founders realised that there were thousands more people living in energy poverty all over the city. People who lacked access to electricity, whose only source of light consisted of a small kerosene lamp with a naked flame. It was this discovery that inspired 5 young Australians to co-found Pollinate Energy and start addressing energy poverty. In a little over 6 months since we arrived on the ground in Bangalore, we've reached over 100 communities around the north of the city. These communities are serviced by our 5 hard-working pollinators, local entrepreneurs who we have helped to start their very own microenergy business. Through a month-long intensive training program alongside our fellows and interns, we provide everything needed by a budding entrepreneur to get their energy business off the ground and keep it going. From market research to continued service support, and most importantly, much needed moral support, we help our pollinators grow their business and ensure that they can continue to help keep the lights on in urban slum communities. We think that reaching 100 communities is a great achievement by our pollinators. However, by our estimates, this is still less than 5% of the unelectrified population of Bangalore alone. There are thousands more in Bangalore and millions more across India that we can help. And we can help by giving more local entrepreneurs an opportunity to start their energy business and in turn, reach more and more communities around the city. So we're asking for your help. We need to raise $10,000 to support 5 new microenergy businesses that will expand into 5 new regions of Bangalore, reaching another 100 communities and thousands more individuals. In recognition of your help, we have some great giveaways based on how much you contribute, including your very own solar-powered eco-light to an exclusive week in Bangalore living and working with our team. Having watched our pollinators flourish and reach more communities than we could have ever imagined, we're confident that the new pollinators we can train, thanks to your help, will take another step on the road to a world free of energy poverty.
If I could sit with the sunset, never to leave here.
So those of you that are coming to our event on the weekend are going to be subjected to that video again. I'm really sorry. But a bit of an introduction to what we're doing. So, all right, so probably the best place to begin our stories with the massive blackout that occurred on July 31st in the north of India last year. Does anybody remember that? Yeah, so the entire north of India went out for 2 or 3 days. Something like 700 million people were plunged into darkness. The Delhi metro stopped working. People were stuck in elevators, and 2 of our co-founders were flying out of Delhi just as that happened. And they landed in London, and all of the newspapers said 700 million people in India plunged into darkness. But then a few days later, everything was off the front covers, and we still knew that there were 300 million people in India that were left in the dark, and there was no reporting of that in the media. So that was kind of the point where we realised maybe there is something that we can do to overcome the problems that we've seen here. We really started because there was one community in the middle of Bangalore that my cousin was working with. So he runs an education NGO in Bangalore. And he spoke to me and also one of the other co-founders and said, maybe you'd like to come along and just do a renewable energy project with this community that I'm working with that have asked me for electricity. So we went there and did a feasibility study, and I was working across Asia at the time, so I'd already interviewed like thousands of people without electricity, so we just sort of went through the normal motions. And then we tried to find a company that would actually serve them and provide a product that was reasonable and would provide after-sales service and maybe microfinance as well. And I looked for about a month and I couldn't find anybody that would serve them because nobody believed in them. So these communities come to Bangalore as economic migrants. They come from other parts of India and also other parts of the state that they're from in search of a better life. But when they get there, they're illegal immigrants and they don't really have access to any services. So people won't give them a product because they think that they're going to be moving soon. They won't give them a loan because they don't know how long they're going to be there for. And also normal banks can't serve them because often they don't have proper documentation. So after that sort of experience and after realising that there were 300 million people in the dark, that's when we thought, well, maybe we should give it a shot. And we served this community and we were able to successfully give them a microfinance loan and to give them products. And from there, one of our co-founders did a Masters of Economics at the London School of Economics, and she went and did a willingness to pay survey with 100 different families in Bangalore and found that there was a significant willingness to pay for a solar lantern product. She did proper economic analysis with statistical, whatever it's called. And they all right. And they, and basically we found that there was sort of a very good core or a very good basis for actually starting a financially sustainable business. It was really, we found the users. We know that there's, 1 million companies out there producing solar lanterns and producing small solar lighting kits. So we really saw the gap in being the distribution. And as Pollinate Energy has evolved, that's really what we've always kept at our core. Like, what is it that's the hardest part in everything that we're seeing? Is it the finance? Is it the distribution? Is it the technology? Whatever it is, that's where we want to be working. So what is it that's actually stopping people from getting the product? So the 2 biggest things at the moment are the microfinance and the distribution. If in the future we find that the microfinance isn't so much of an issue, we'd just stop doing that. We'd just do the distribution. Or if we found that there was a product that people really wanted to buy but they couldn't because they needed some small modifications, then that's what we would do. That's what's at our core. So we're primarily an energy access business. So like I said, the 3 biggest problems that we saw was that people couldn't access these services because they couldn't afford them. There was no effective supply chain despite these people being like right in the middle of the city. And also they were using kerosene. And one of the things that really gets me about people that are living without electricity is that it's not like this really nice hurricane lantern that they're using that's got, a protected kerosene flame. It's actually just a small little medicine bottle that they pour a little bit of kerosene into, and it just has like a wick with a naked flame. So they live in plastic tents, the people that we work with. So there's quite often house fires and people getting burnt from these lights as well. So they're paying more per kilowatt hour for electricity than we pay, and they're getting by far a much worse service in comparison. So that's why we're primarily a services business. We run off a business in a bag model. So we start little micro franchises and train people up to basically start their own renewable energy or clean energy businesses supported by the Pollinate Energy infrastructure. So these people basically have everything that they need to go out and start selling these solar lantern products. So they get a month of in-class and on-the-ground training, which I'll talk about more in a second. They've got proven business processes. So we actually did this ourselves before we got anybody else to come and do it. We spent 3 months working with translators, going out every night in the communities to see whether we could actually sell these products and what kind of processes you needed to do that. So we have all of our experience from doing that, like, oh, have you tried this approach, or did you ask this question, and those sorts of things. And our head of operations did the same thing as well. So he ran his own clean energy business for a month doing the same thing. So he knows exactly what it is that the people that he's working with have seen every day. So it just operates like a standard franchise in that way. It's not any more complicated than, you know, McDonald's, where they say, you know, if you follow these processes, you can sell these products, you'll make this much profit, that sort of thing. We also do a lot of market research for our businesses before they start. So we actually, you can see the communities that we work with on Google Maps. So we first of all do a screen of Google Maps. We look for all the tents and we plot them. And then before we bring anyone on, we actually go out and visit those communities and see whether they're suitable communities, and also that the density in the regions that we're giving the pollinators actually has enough communities in there to sustain their business. So actually we've just recruited for our next 5 entrepreneurs, and right before I came out to Australia this time, I spent a week going around and visiting those communities and seeing if there was enough people there and if there was enough interest for people to start. So the market research for them, a lot of it's already done. They get a rotating stock loan, so there's no way that they could afford to buy 30 or 40 systems to be able to start up their business. So we provide them with a grant at the beginning for those 30 or 40 systems. And then as they pay those systems back to us, we allow them to purchase new systems. So they always have 30 to 40 systems in their stock. They also get service support. So our pollinators often only have up to year 10 level of education and can't necessarily read that well. So you can't really give them detailed instructions on how to fix things, or, you know, a lot of these things are done much cheaper if you do them centralised as well. So we do a lot of the servicing of the products in-house. We have a very simple product anyway, so it doesn't, which I'll talk about more in a second, but doesn't really require a huge amount of detail anyway. So it's not, you know, these massive systems that you have on top of houses. The last thing is that we give them moral support. So just like any sales role, if you're going into a community day after day after day and getting rejected day after day after day, you're probably not going to keep doing it unless someone's sort of there behind you going, come on, you can keep doing it, it'll be fine. Like, you're just having a bad week or whatever it is. So we also sometimes go out if they're having a particularly rough time with the community. Just before I came out, there's one really big community in one of my pollinator Rajan's areas, and he was having problems with the landowner. So the landowner didn't want the community to buy lights because he was afraid that that would make them look more permanent, and he wanted them to leave. They were squatting on the land. He didn't want them to stay there. So I went out with Rajan and went to visit the landowner and had to talk to him about his concerns, and just sort of explained what we were doing and the fact that our system's really, really tiny and it's really easy for people to take with them. And then the landowner agreed to let the people on the land, on that particular piece of land, pay. So it's just sort of those little things where maybe they've tried 3 or 4 times and it's just another voice coming in. Sometimes it's, you know, the fact that there's a foreigner there or something like that, to give them that support so that they can continue to provide the service. This isn't an uncommon model at all. So lots of energy access businesses around the world follow this type of model. If you know much about the solar lantern companies, they all have, especially in East Africa, sort of little mini micro businesses that are doing this sort of thing. So this particular way of distributing solar lantern products isn't unusual, but it's just that there's nobody in the area that we're doing that's doing it as well. And also often this works better with people that are more permanent. So we're taking a huge risk in providing loans to people that are temporary. But our research so far has shown that even if they disappear for a couple of months halfway through their loan terms are usually only 5 weeks. So they might pay 3 weeks, then disappear for a couple of months and then come back, and they'll most often pay the last 2 weeks. So we've sold 600 systems so far and we've only had a couple of defaults. So, and even with those, most of the loan was already paid off before they disappeared, and they may still come back. So, so this is one of our first pollinators. This is Arun. He's crazy. He's 19 years old. He only finished up to year 10 education. And for the first month that we had him, we couldn't stop bouncing off the walls. But we're really lucky in that with this sort of business with a bag model, what we've done is we bring students out, and some of them actually did photovoltaics, for a month in India to work for that first month with the on-the-ground training with the pollinators. So they basically fundraise the startup costs for those clean energy businesses. Then they come over and then they spend the first month working with those clean energy businesses to help them find the new communities and to sell the products and to learn about what it is that they're doing. So Amit, who some of you guys might know, and then another woman named Alexi worked with Arun for a month, taught him about processes, taught him about, turning up to work on time, and also how to run a small energy business, and then leveraged his natural sales abilities and talents. So he's a very good talker and a very good networker, and so that makes for a perfect salesman. So they were like, okay, well, if you just sort of get these few things into line with your strengths and just make sure that you follow these simple principles and then repeat that for 30 days, you'll be able to run your successful business forever. So that's the model that we follow for the startup of these businesses. So Arun is sort of juxtaposed against one of our other pollinators, Manjunath, who is very structured and disciplined and ordered in the way that he does things, but he's not the best salesman. So he's not as great a talker and he's not as great a networker. So for that first month, his team spent a lot of time sort of strategizing with him. Okay, so how could you start this conversation? How could you do this sales pitch? Let's do a little bit of a role play. Whereas Arun didn't really need that at all. So, a lot of that first month is sort of developing those skills. The families that we serve are from rural areas primarily. So as I said, they're economic migrants that have moved into the city. This is Suresh and his family. His story is very typical. So he's from the north part of the state that we work in called Karnataka. He was working in a rural area, and then now he works as a day labourer on a construction site, which basically means, because he has no skills, that he carries around concrete on a dish on his head, or he breaks up material with hand tools, or just assists with moving things around on a construction site. And that's basically how things are built in the part of the world that we work in and that we live in. So a lot of the time it's not complicated machinery, they're just using people to do the work. He earns probably about $4 to $6 a day, and his wife, who I think is this lady here, works with him on the construction sites as well, and earns probably about half to 2/3 of what he earns, because she can't do as much heavy lifting. They live in one of our biggest communities, which looks really similar to this, but isn't actually this one. So you can see that they're basically just usually on clear land. For whatever reason, someone's decided not to build there, or they've just allowed these people to squat. They live in the middle of, right in the middle of the city, so people will live in these apartment buildings and work in these retail shops around where they are. It's not that uncommon for these people to get kicked off their land. So actually, Suresh has a really sad story in that a couple of months ago, the government decided that they wanted to build an apartment block on their land. So they brought in a whole bunch of bulldozers and knocked down half of his land. and there was about 100 communities living there. So everybody sort of moved into the middle strip, which was around the sewer line, which was privately owned and not owned by the government. But Suresh was one of the people that got kicked off. Luckily, he was able to find another site not too far away where he could move him and his family. But it's just, I mean, that's the sort of life that these guys have to deal with. They don't know how long they're going to be able to live exactly where they're living for and how soon they're going to have to pack up, which for us as a business means that they do present a risk for finance. So the shorter that we can keep our payment terms, the better. And also the product needs to be really easy to move. So they need to be able to just pack it up in a day and not have to worry about it because they're too busy worrying about where they're going to move to that day, and then just take it with them. So the way that these people purchased electricity before they bought their solar light was that they would just go down to a local store and they would purchase a couple of litres of kerosene and then share that amongst sort of the people in the local area, and it would usually cost them something on the order of $2 a week. Like I said, it's a naked flame inside a tent, so it's not that uncommon for them to have house fires from that. Also, the light that they get from, a naked kerosene flame, as you can imagine, is pretty crap. There's not really much that you can do with it. You get more light from cooking on the stoves at night than you do just from that light. So now that when they have their solar light, there's quite a few improvements that you see. So we have a couple of people that we're working with that now are able to work longer hours. It's not that common with our customers because most of our customers are day labourers on construction sites. So giving them light in the evenings doesn't mean that they'll necessarily be able to earn any more income. But we do have a couple of people that we've sold lights to who are tailors. So that means that now they can extend their working hours by 1 or 2 hours. Quite a lot of the families that we've sold to have kids. So that means that the kids are able to study at night. And just generally horse around even more in the evenings than they did just in the day. Also, they can socialise. So one of the cool things about the communities as you start working in them and as you start reaching some level of penetration is the houses with the lights kind of become social hubs. So you walk in and you're looking for the people that owe you money and you find them all congregated in the tent with the lights. They're very easy to find. And they're just sort of, hanging out there for the evening or whatever it is. Some of our communities we're getting very close to 100% penetration in the tent, so that's pretty cool as well. So you go in at night and all of the lights sort of going down the path that you're walking are lit up, whereas when you first went in there, it was just the light from the cooking stoves. So this is the region that we were first working in. So this is the north of Bangalore. The centre of Bangalore is down, this is a good time for the pointer. Is it? Oh, here we go. The centre of Bangalore is down here and the airport's up here. So this is actually about a 10 to 15 kilometre radius, this area that we're working in at the moment. This was our very first region, and then we split up the communities that we were working with in the beginning between our 5 pollinators. In this area, we're now working with about 130 communities, and we've hand counted 17,000 people living in tents without access to electricity. So there's actually a lot more people in this area living in tents, but some of them have access to electricity, which often means that they've managed to convince a local shop to send down an extension cord down into the tents, which they then plug, some type of electrical device in to get light from. We don't serve those communities. We only serve the ones that have absolutely no access to electricity, although sometimes you'll have hybrids, so you'll have tents sort of on the edge that have that level of electricity. So the market research that we've done in this area has sort of given us a lot of motivation to expand and to continue what we're doing. So there was a really big study done in Bangalore in 2010 which said that there were 20,000 people living without electricity in these sorts of conditions in Bangalore. But we found 17,000 just in this small area. So it's probably a lot bigger. And when you drive around, like every second block that you go down, you'll just be like, there's a tent, there's a tent, there's a tent. So everywhere that there's a construction site, there's always workers that are living somewhere nearby that are building that particular property. Whenever there's a really big area with nothing on it, there'll also be people squatting there. So for the group that we're bringing out, or that we're starting in July, they're actually going to move down into the east, which is sort of down here. So we'll have 5 there. And then in November, we're going to have another 5 that will cover the south. And then in January, we're going to have another 5 that will cover the west. So we're hoping that by the start of next year, we'll have Pollinate Energy businesses which cover across Bangalore. And the event that we're having on Saturday is actually to raise money to move to our next city. So next year, we're hoping to move to either Hyderabad or Chennai or both, depending on how much money we're able to raise. So we certainly have the capacity to move to both cities, so it's really just a matter of how the pilot in this city goes for the rest of the year and how much money we're able to raise to be able to start those businesses. The whole, as I was saying before, the whole Pollinate Energy model is financed basically by a fellowship program where students from Australia and around the world come to India to start up these businesses. So this was actually based off some friends of ours that started a business in Ghana that does exactly the same thing. They start clean water businesses. They go out and do all the market research. They started a business themselves before anyone else. And now they bring out students primarily from the UK to undertake these sorts of businesses. The other reason that we started this was because I had really no idea what social entrepreneurship meant when I lived in Sydney. So I was working in the corporate world for 5 years, and people here just had no idea what it meant to be an entrepreneur. And it was sort of, you were either corporate or charity, you couldn't really be both, and people just didn't really seem to be, that innovative in the way that they came up with new ideas or new businesses. And then when I went to San Francisco, every second person that I spoke to was starting up their own business, which also is inefficient in its own way. But they all knew which state in the United States was the best one to start a business in because of the best tax laws. And I was like, in Australia, nobody would know what the best state in Australia to start a business is. Apparently it's Victoria. But it's not, it's not really a language that we speak here, and it's not really something that's sort of part of our culture. So one thing that we really wanted to do with the student program was to, of course, start these clean energy businesses, which is the core of what we are. But when we bring these students over, talk to them about starting their own things, come up with their own new ideas in their 5 little businesses. They can basically do whatever they want if they think it's going to work. I mean, that's what we did when we moved there. So of course you have guidelines and they discuss things with us first. Hi, Alistair. They come and talk to us first, but if they have a good idea about a new payment plan or a new sales strategy or whatever, we tell them, just go and do it. Like, you've got a couple of families that you want to sell to tomorrow, why not just give it a go? Because that's the best way to launch something, is to just give it a go. So they're sort of the 2 arms of what Pollinate Energy does, is try to promote social entrepreneurship in Australia and just entrepreneurship in general. So coming up with new ideas, launching businesses, taking stuff to market, and then also solving one of the world's biggest problems, which is energy poverty. And we're actually quite passionate about this model moving into other areas as well. So what we've launched just in the last month is the Young Professionals program, because we had a lot of people come to us after we launched our student program saying, we really want to come, but we're not students and we don't have a month off. So is there anything else that you can offer? And because we think that the model works across lots of different industries, we're actually going to introduce new products to our existing pollinators. So that's what we're going to use the young professionals for. They're going to come out to India for 2 weeks instead of 4 and work with our 10 existing businesses that we'll have at that stage to introduce a new product and help them learn about how that works and also how to sell it. So the products that we're going to start with this year, which is August, September, will either be a fuel efficient stove or a water filter. And the aim would be to introduce the other one of those products, depending on how that first launch goes, 3 to 4 months later, or perhaps a year later if everything else is sort of getting too much. The Young Professionals program has a slightly different bent. So student fellowship programs very focused on social entrepreneurship, but the problem with corporates in Australia is they get really scared about entrepreneurship programs and they won't send any of their staff along onto something that will make it look like they'll have to leave at the end of those 2 weeks, because entrepreneurship is about starting a new business. So with our young professionals program, what we've billed it as is an entrepreneurship program. Has anyone heard about this? It's one of those new buzzwords, kind of like captive energy, which we were talking about before, which is about starting new businesses within your own business. So whatever it is that you're working on now. So if you started up a new division, or, you know, even at a university, if you started up a new degree program or something like that, that would be seen as entrepreneurship. So for our 2 weeks, we're encouraging people to come up with new ideas and implement them within the bounds of what it is that they're already doing, which is perfect for us as well, because they're introducing a new product into an existing business. So having to take the bounds of that existing business, their region, the customers that they're already serving, and introduce a new idea, which is this new product. So anyway, if you know anyone that's interested, this is the program that we have going at the moment, and applications are due June 11th. Our impact so far, so we have 6 staff. Oh yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about here. So with our young fellowship program, the way that it works is that we have the 2 Australian students, and then we have an Indian intern, and then we have our pollinator. So one question that I get asked all the time is how we cope with the language. Pretty much everybody that has a university level education or above speaks perfect English. Our pollinators that are usually educated to year 10 and year 12 have okay English, so it's not perfect, but it's enough to sort of get by. The people that we work with in the communities generally speak no English, although you will occasionally meet a master, like an arts master's student that speaks perfect English, and you're like, what are you doing here? But anyway, we have that group of 4, and the Indian intern is sort of the glue between all of the pieces, because they speak English and they also speak Kannada, the local language, and they also help with some of the cultural differences. And it also gives the Indian interns a really great opportunity to experience people from other cultures and also to work in a social business too. So Amit, who's one of your master's students that you guys might know, was one of our first interns that worked with us. Okay, so we've started with our 6 pollinators, and then we also have a head of operations who works with us in Bangalore as well. And when we extend to 20 people, 20 clean energy businesses across Bangalore, then we'll probably introduce an accountant and a monitoring team as well to help him go out and make sure that all the installations are being done correctly and all the panels are being kept clean and that sort of thing. This is our impact so far. So our average household has about 4.6 people in it, which is amazing, because the average house is like probably the size of, you know, in between those 2 desks. I actually did this presentation last week to a whole bunch of people that work in sustainability, and the kilograms of CO2 that they save, like, this is how much, so they save on average about 100 kilograms of CO2 per metre squared in one office building in 1 year. And so they look at this number, and that's 57 square metres of office building, which is like this much, you know, sort of room in, or like, no, what is it, about half a floor in 1 year. So they just laughed at me. They're like, maybe next time you shouldn't put that number up. But we're still pretty like impressed with it. This is against the kerosene that they would have used in their house anyway. This number is sort of a lot more impressive. So this is the amount of money that we've cumulatively saved these people over time. So the system that we're selling at the moment, just in terms of the economics for our average customer, pays back after about 5 months. So, and then after that, the warranty's for 1 year, and we haven't seen a product out in the marketplace for 2 years, but we're sort of hoping that they'll last 2 years. The manufacturer says 5 years, but the manufacturer hasn't been in our communities, and our communities treat our products really terribly. So I think 2 years is going to be a pretty good lifetime for these sorts of things. And that's the amount of kerosene that we've saved. So this bit's probably a little bit more interesting for you guys. So on the technology side, this is the product that we started with. So we worked with a local manufacturer who has He actually has disabled staff working for him that build these products by hand in Bangalore. And that was really the model that we wanted to follow. And it's a lot cheaper as well. So we could get this product for less than what we're spending on our product now. And it was a lot bigger. So it's much better value for money. It's got a 5-watt panel, a really big 1-watt LED light, which is very bright, a small security light, which is sort of 0.1 watts that they can leave on during the night because that's what they told us that they wanted. And then it had 3 days of autonomy in the battery, but it was a lead acid battery. The problem with this was that the warranty on the system wasn't great. So he always wanted to do repairs on the system and then send them back out to the customers, which would mean that our customers, they're not always in the same place, which would mean that sometimes they'd go quite a long time without light, and that wasn't our mission. Our mission was to make sure that the lights were never off in these people's houses after they bought a system for us. And also he couldn't achieve the scale that we wanted to achieve. So when we were doing 50 systems a month, it wasn't such a big deal. He was able to sort of fulfill those requirements. But now we're doing more on the scale of 50 systems a week, and he just can't cope with that at all. So we're still hoping that we'll be able to work out something with him in the long term, but we've actually moved on to more of a standard solar lantern product. Has anyone seen this one before? This is Green Light Planet, or heard of it? It's sort of one of the, so have you guys all heard of Barefoot Power and D-Light? Yeah, so they're kind of the big end of town, I guess. So between D-Light and Barefoot Planet, I think they've sold, I think they've sold a couple of million systems. Greenlight Planet's sort of the next rung down, but we actually think it's a much better product. And this is also an Indian company as well. So it's got we call it a Life of Pi battery. It's a lithium battery. But the difference, this system had a 5-watt panel. This system only has a 2-watt panel, and it also only has 1 light. So whereas the other one, they could sort of spread out across their home, this one they can only have in one place. But they do have a no questions asked replacement policy on their warranty, which is just phenomenal. So if you go in and it's not obvious that the customer's broken it, then you can just replace it and the manufacturer will replace it straight away because they have so much faith in the rigour of their product. We actually have had quite a number of systems come back from people that have just broken it. So I never thought that we'd see a solar panel get smashed, but we did. I don't know how they did that, but they did. There's a lot of in some of our communities, we have some problems with violence, but domestic violence, not anything that we've ever seen. So we think that there might be something sort of in that's injuring our solar lanterns as well, which is really unfortunate. So it has 3 modes. So it's got a low mode, a medium mode, and a high mode. And on the highest mode, it lasts for 6 hours, and on the low mode, it lasts for 30 hours. And it lasts half of that if you charge it with the mobile phone as well. And it pretty much charges most mobile phones. If you've got it like a really fancy colour screen, like what most of us will have for our smartphones, it won't charge that. But just sort of your average Nokia, like the really, really simple Nokias, and even the next level up from that where you can actually play small videos on the screen, it will charge those. And it will do so actually if the battery's fully charged in a couple of hours, so it's pretty fast. The way that these guys were charging their mobile phones before is really interesting. They used to do it at work, or they would take it down to a local shop and get the local shop to charge it for sort of 20 cents or whatever. But often the local shop would change out their battery with another one that was old and perhaps didn't work as well. So that would cost them quite a bit of money. So we don't factor that into our economics when we talk to our customers, but they always factor it in. So they know how much a new battery costs. They know that a mobile phone charge is really, really important. When we did our first big willingness to pay study with those 100 families that I told you about at the beginning, people were actually willing to pay much more for a mobile phone charger than they were willing to pay for a light. So we have 3 products, this one and 2 smaller ones, but the 2 smaller ones don't have mobile phone chargers, so this is the one that everybody's buying. That we're planning on moving to fuel-efficient stoves next. Probably something more like this system than this system. So this is sort of an inbuilt system with a chimney that you see quite a way around the place. But our people live in tents and they're also transitory. So you'd sort of build it and then maybe a couple of months later they would move. Something like this is a lot more expensive, so we don't quite know how it's going to go, but it can move with them when they go. Just, in terms of facts and figures, this one has no smoke in the house because it all goes out the chimney. This stove, which is the EnviroFit stove, is about 80% less smoke than a standard open fireplace, which is what everybody that we're working with is using. So, what has been hardest thus far? People always ask me this, so I chucked the slide in. One of our biggest problems is making people believe that there are people in Bangalore without electricity. So, one of the funniest things is we went to visit ANZ in a massive tech park in the north of Bangalore to tell them about what we were doing. And they were like, there's nobody in Bangalore without electricity. And we took them to the top floor of their building and then pointed at them. And we're like, that's our community down there. Those 200 families, they have no electricity. Even the interns that work with us, a lot of them who have lived in Bangalore their whole life just don't even see these communities. So it's been really hard to find local partners because you'll go in and talk to them and they'll be like, there's nobody in Bangalore without electricity, your business model doesn't work. The second one was recruiting. So it was really hard for us to find pollinators to work with us, which was really funny because we had students who were paying to spend time with us, Indian interns who were working with us for free, and then people who we were paying to work with us. And the recruiting was completely flipped. So we had no problems finding students, like we had a total oversupply of people that were interested. We had quite a lot of interest from interns, but then the people that we were paying, none of them were interested. And we think it's because we are still learning how to talk their language. So we know, we were students once, we understand, we did the degree programs that you guys were doing or have done. And so we knew exactly what to say to those people. But the people at the other end of the spectrum that are sort of year 10 education, it took us a long time to get the messaging right to be able to attract people to come and work with us. It's getting a lot easier now, but it was one of the hardest things. Also, we learned about warranties and scalability the hard way. So like I said, we had to move between product manufacturers because of that. And also gaining the support of the Indian industry. So as you can see from our next slide here, we've got, for 6 months of operation, we've actually secured quite a lot of corporate partners for what we're doing from Australia. But that's because we have lots of networks in Australia and we all used to work here. Getting those supporters from the Indian side has been a bit trickier. So we've got some people that are quite interested and we're sort of going through the process of that now. But it was a much harder slog for us, whereas I used to work with Kunjal in the Green Building Council, so when I went and told them, they were like, great, yes, definitely. And UNSW, from the very beginning, you guys supported us. Thank you very much for that. The other thing I actually really wanted to show you guys was this book. So this book was like a Bible for us. So if anybody's ever interested in this space or knows somebody that wants to start something, it's called Green Energy for $1 Billion Poor, and it was written by Nancy Wimmer on Grameen Shakti's business in Bangladesh. And she goes like down to the level of how many staff they had in each of their branches when they started out and all the problems that they had and who they buy their systems from now. It is a really phenomenal book. So if anybody's interested, definitely would recommend this one. And it's really easy to read too. It's actually not that dissimilar from Jeff Stapleton's book, The Solar Entrepreneur's Handbook, which has also been a really important book for us. But this one's his is more technical orientated, this one's more business orientated. So anyway, that's the end. Thanks.
So we have time for a few questions.
Yeah, of course.
Any questions? Free to go ahead.
Could you explain how the business works? So how do you keep yourself employed and the other people that are working that are not volunteers?
Mm-hmm.
How are the funds coming into the company?
So at the moment, because we're a startup, you always have costs that are greater than what it is that you're spending in the beginning, but then the cash flow evens out over time. So the way that we're funding this initial bit is that we all have other jobs as well. So I do a couple of days of consulting a month. One of our other founders does 3 days a week and one other girl does 1 day a week. So that's the three of us that are in Bangalore. The way that So that's just at the higher level. Everything from the head of operations down is already financially sustainable, even just with our 5 pollinators. So the student fellows come in, they raise money, they start the business, and then after the pollinators' businesses has started, they can keep going sort of into infinity and beyond just on selling the solar lights. And the profit that they make on those solar lights funds both their salary and the support structure of the Pollinate Energy business side for them. And that's even just with 5 pollinators. So when we get to 20 pollinators, those capital or sort of those fixed costs are going to be even smaller. So we'll use some of that money to help start new businesses in other cities as well. For everything that's above the line, so the 3 of us that are working in India, at the moment we're funding a lot of that off grant money. As we get bigger and are in more cities, and like I said, as we are able to access more of the margin on the solar light, some of our salaries will be covered by that as well. But we're also looking at other opportunities too. So there's a lot of people in Bangalore that want 10 kilowatt systems. So we could have one person that does that and then cross-subsidises into our business as well. There's also a lot of people that have not no access to electricity, but very poor access to electricity, and they have been dying to buy our products. So every time we sell, they're always in the communities harassing us to buy. So if funding does become an issue, we'll just start selling to them and use that money to cross-subsidise working in the slums as well. But we wanted to do the slums first before we did anything else, because it's really hard to go back into that. So if you start there and then grow out, then everything sort of seems easy. Does that make sense? Yeah. Still figuring it out. Yes.
Hey, Monique, fantastic. Thanks for that. Really encouraging to see such interesting stuff happening. So well done. Just on what you were saying then, and I know you're focusing on the poorer communities. It intrigues me. I guess. Sorry, no, I missed this, but there's not people. They're not able to swipe. Usually they're swiping, they're stealing electricity off the grid that runs around, so you just get that sort of thing. So
there are a lot of communities that are doing that. So like I was saying at the beginning, that we've found in our like 10 kilometre area radius, 17,000 people that aren't doing that, but we found a lot of people that are doing that as well. So there's a lot of squatters living all around the city in all different states of electrification. So sometimes they're stealing from the grid like that. Sometimes they've got like a long extension cord going into their tent. Yeah, you really see everything. You see people using like charged AC lanterns. So they just have like a normal lantern that they plug into a power point, and then they use that at night for 6 to 8 hours. But we just let the market speak for itself. So we've gone in and talked to the people, and we've said, like, what is it that you want? And they want to be autonomous, because if they connect to an illegal electricity line, that's another reason for someone, especially the government, to come in and kick them off their land. And they like the fact that when they buy from us, when they move to somewhere else, which they're planning to do, they can take it with them. We did talk to them a lot about just providing an AC battery charge light, and they sort of confirmed what we thought as well, that there isn't a lot of good products on the market for a start. Like, most of the good products seem to be more in the solar lantern space. I guess that's because that's where people are willing to provide money for R&D as well. But yeah, and also, you know, you might move somewhere where you don't necessarily have the option to charge that. Is that a good answer?
yeah, that's a great.
Yes.
Just interested in the risk. Like you said, the products might have been smashed or broken for certain thing. When I guess the whole thing is that they've spent the money up front. This is the problem with renewables everywhere. You spend the money up front and then rely on it working for 20 years to pay itself back.
Oh, yeah, I guess for us it's only 5 months. So it's 5 months, so it's not that big a deal. But yeah, I mean, it is definitely a problem. But we never have if they break their product, we never have a problem with getting them to buy a new one. They understand that it was their fault. So they've got at least, because we give them a payment plan as well. So it's not like they have to pay it all up front. They can pay it over a couple of months if they want to, and take a bit of a break. But yeah, I mean, we're just lucky it doesn't happen all the time. So we've only had a couple of them come back like that. Yes.
So this system was easily afforded by most of the people, like, did anyone find it expensive or?
Definitely people still find it expensive, and it's not an easy sell. So often we'll have to go back into a community 3 or 4 times before someone will buy. Usually because they don't trust us, so they think that we're just going to sell them this piece of rubbish and then leave. So they want to make sure that we're going to be there, and it takes them a little bit of time to rearrange their finances so that they can pay back the loan, even though it's only over a short period. It would be better if we could provide it cheaper. We'd love to, but we can't sustain the model that we want to sustain unless we keep it at the level that we do. And it is within reach of most of the people that we work with. There are definitely people that are poorer than what we're able to provide to.
But most of the people, even if they find it expensive, you were able to convince them that this is they were convinced that this is actually good.
Yeah. So especially once they start to see it in a few other houses and they see the benefits for it. So we're not pushy at all. We just, if people say to us, no, we definitely don't want to buy, we don't harass them. We just we let the product speak for itself. We put demonstration systems into the communities for the first few weeks so that they can see how it operates. Every single one of those demonstration systems converts to a sale. We don't really need to do anything. It's providing, a service that all of us take for granted. So it's definitely something that they want. Yes.
You had a figure up there saying how many rupees saved. Was that just the cost of kerosene? Was that also including the cost of the system? And is that like a net savings? Was that?
It's not net savings, no. So that's just what they're saving on kerosene. So technically, yes, you should also deduct the price of the system. Yep.
And what is the price of the system? Because I think you said that average daily wage for some of these people was it $5 a day, around that?
Yeah, it's around it's around $5 a day. The system that they buy from us most often costs $30, and then they pay it back over 6 weeks. I think that's right, 1,700 rupees, about $30, $32. So
does the portability of the systems mean that theft is an issue?
Everyone always says that to us, but we haven't had a system stolen yet. So there's
It's easy to find who stole it in that community.
because you can just follow the light. Yeah. There's a lot of really good passive surveillance in the community. So a lot of women stay home during the day, or there's kids running around and that kind of thing that aren't going to school. So yeah, they could do that. But also they do, even though it is a tent, it's still relatively sturdy, and if you were trying to break into it would be really obvious, and they usually lock them up with a dog chain and a lock. So they'll leave the light with the battery inside and the panel outside, wired into the top beam of the tent. So it is possible. It would take a little bit of work. We haven't had one happen yet. I think it's just a matter of time until one does.
Well, we should probably wrap it up. I don't know, Monique, if you're going to be around, if anyone has any further questions.
Yep.
But I'd like to thank you very much and wish you the best of luck in your event tomorrow. If you have any more information about that you'd like to give out.
If anyone wants to come, it's on Saturday night. We have 10 tickets left, I think, for the standing tickets. Okay. Nitin's coming. So you'll know people.
But I hope you'll join me in thanking Monique again for joining us and giving us a very interesting presentation today. Thank you, Monique.